the term Illuminati gets thrown around a lot, and I've noticed that a lot of people throw it around without actually knowing much about it. It's sort of got its stereotype, and it's got its sort of what it means today gets sort of when people talk about the Illuminati, they just sort of put it out there, and it just means this big group of evil people. Full stop. That's it. But I was hoping you could give us a more of a probably a background and more of a description of what they actually do, where they came from, and how much they actually impact our life today.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. And just to keep it more like conversational, I won't pull up my notes, so I might get like some dates and places like shifted like just slightly, you know what I mean? But I think one of my favorite analogies here is when you think about branding or when you think about how like a very specific feature gets attributed to like a wider practice. And to be practical, you ever heard someone say, I know it's a little bit dated now, like, oh, go make a Xerox of that, paper. Like, I'll go make a Xerox of it. And what they really mean is go make me a copy of it. They don't mean go find specifically a Xerox machine and use that to make me like just make me a copy. Whatever you got to do, make me a copy, get me a Xerox of it. And Xerox fought against that, really, really hard. Same thing with I think Polaroid, like, oh, take me a Polaroid of that. And it's like companies end up doing too well at branding themselves, or they're too good at a certain technology or practice that everyone just refers to it as the thing, right? Like, give me a Coke. And it's like, well, do you want a Pepsi? Do you want a Coke? You mean a cola or do you want a Coke? So once you own that term because you've just done something so monumental or so, like world changing that people just refer to it as that. So the analogy here is that the Illuminati was so good at what they did. The original Illuminati, which is the Bavarian Illuminati, and there were other groups that called themselves something that could have been translated, but specifically, we're talking about the one founded May 1st, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, and he kind of had a second in charge after he had grown this for a little bit. But that Illuminati was so great at infiltrating other secret societies and garnering this like intelligence network. It was like one of the original, sort of like CIA type organizations or Mossad. Like it was way older than that, but they figured out a way to really concentrate a bunch of knowledge and just information. And then being able to do that, it kind of like reverberates through the centuries. So even though the Bavarian Illuminati itself kind of dissipated, now it's like that's the Xerox. You know what I mean? Like if you can infiltrate some kind of a high class society or like a powerful small group, if I can infiltrate that from far away and maintain control over it in a way that they don't realize, that's an Illuminati. So it gets thrown around, but I think it does get thrown around in an appropriate way. Because even when someone's like, "Oh, it's the hip hop Illuminati," Drake's in the hip hop. I mean, they're like Drake is a kingmaker, right? If he just plucked a random person off SoundCloud that had 400 total plays and was like, "Yo, everyone, follow this guy. I'm gonna be doing like an album with him. He's gonna be featured on my next two out." Like, guess what? Even if that's music has no merit and no one likes it, like he's probably gonna get like a million followers just because he was touched by a kingmaker. So in that regard, there is some merit in just blindly throwing Illuminati around because there kind of are these like little secret cabals. But to specifically talk about the Bavarian Illuminati and their practices, I think that's like a lot of people don't even realize where that word came from and why it has that power to it.
So when you mentioned hip hop Illuminati, what when you see like Jay Z gets brought up a lot and the symbolism
Yeah, because he always
does that,
does.
yeah.
Yeah,
What
of
does that
course, man.
what does that actually mean then? Is that just something that Jay Z does to make himself brand himself as Illuminati so he gets more publicity? Or
Yeah, I mean, I personally think so, but he also by saying it and being adamant about it, he also kind of made that into being because all just like Drake, right? If Jay-Z decided I'm gonna make this person famous, like they got the power to do that. He's like another kingmaker, but he's a special one because he also like dances around with Marina Abramovich, the lady that does like the spirit cooking, and I think he's worn like Aleister Crowley sort of shirts or maybe like little symbols and stuff before. So it's very specifically overtly occult, right? It's like occult's hidden, but when you do it outward to get people to think that you're a cult, there's definitely some marketing aspect to it, but it's also like it works, right? So I don't know, like we can't argue with the results that he gets from the whole thing too.
Mm. Yeah, that is true. Well, what was the Illuminati originally set up to achieve?
So Adam Weishaupt grew up in this basically took place in Ingolstadt, and he grew up in this area where the Jesuits ran everything, including the school that he went to and then became sort of a professor at. And during this course of his life, he lived at a very unique time when the Jesuits fell out of favor with the rest of like the authorities in Germany. I think it came from the Pope. I think that they actually like basically took away a lot of the Jesuits' original control. And in that transition, he gets automatically sort of like promoted to a head position within the College of Ingolstadt. And I think it was law. He was some kind of like a law, like the youngest law professor in history at Ingolstadt. But part of that was because it was like, get these Jesuits out of here and get a non-Jesuit in place. And then he saw himself as very much an atheist. So he kind of had this very pugilistic, sort of like antithemic, like dynamic between him and these Jesuit teachers, where he now wanted to be like do the opposite of what they were doing. He wanted to take all the religion out of all the schooling, but he lived in a society that was still so indoctrinated with the Jesuit teaching that he realized he had to do it in secret. Otherwise, he'd get kind of squashed out. So he slowly began finding other people that were sort of sympathetic to his own cause. And what he would do is, I mean, this is like the very, very beginning of the Bavarian Illuminati. If people wanted to join, he'd have them basically write out all the bad things that they've done, like kind of like, oh, here's all the blackmail that you could have on me in exchange for me being part of the group. So then you do that to like the first 3 or 4 people, and then you go and they don't know each other, right? So right now, Adam Weishaupt's the only one that even knows who else is in the Illuminati. They don't know each other. Then he goes and he finds out like who that person's friends are, gets them to join the Illuminati, but doesn't tell, hey, your friend's in it, right? He's just like, hey, you've been selected for this very elite group. So then he has friends spying on each other. And he's like, if you want to stay in, you tell me what like, homie over here is doing. And then he goes to the homie over there and he's like, hey, tell me what your friend's up to. And he just keeps doing that with as many people as he can. But he's not just targeting random people. He's targeting like the heads of departments that are highly specialized in certain types of information, right? So at a certain point, he's like the top of this pyramid and he's got all these tendrils, and each one of those tendrils is a little string that he can pull at. So if someone were to come to him, let's assume it's you, right? So Adam, like instead of Adam Weishaupt, someone comes to you and they're like, hey, what is the way that I can turn this particular chemical substance into another one? And it's the late 1700s. Not a lot of people know that information. You don't even know that information, but you sure as heck know the guy that knows that information. So then someone writes you that letter and you're just like, oh, let me ask my friend. Oh, that's how you do it. And then you respond, but you respond as though like you're the one that knew that. So all of a sudden you become like this all-knowing, all-seeing person that like you knew what everyone was up to. All their research before they even are publishing it because you've got your eye in everywhere. And what I'm describing is an intelligence network. That's all it is, right? If you boil it down, that's exactly what the CIA or the NSA or any kind of 3-letter intelligence agency does, is they just kind of like get their tendrils in a lot of places and then try to like sway things based on the information they've got. They don't have any real power or any real knowledge except for the knowledge that they convince other people to give them. So there you go. That's like the essential underlying, and that's just Adam Weishaupt as he started it as an individual.
So it started off just initially Weishaupt's network of people, and he was using them to play off each other.
Yeah, and it was doing it in also an attempt to kind of bring down the rest of the Jesuit and like religious influenced academic institution, because like the educational system was basically created by the Jesuits at that point, and trying to remove the religious component to that was kind of one of his goals, but it would be so damn hard to do out, in the open, because everyone, even if it was no longer Jesuit run, it was still very much a religious society. You couldn't just come out and say, I'm going to be atheist, I'm going to start taking the religion out of everything. So that was the means for the covert aspect. But then, I mean, as you get into that chair, and now I know everyone's, dirty work, and I know all this information, and I've got every sort of resource at my fingertips, that kind of power kind of can go to somebody's head. So that there's a huge aspect of that. And that's where the Bavarian Illuminati really kind of took off, where people refer to it today. If it had just stopped at him being, this guy high at Ingolstadt, that would have been one thing. But they go on to infiltrate, all sorts of Freemasonry across Europe. And at that point, I think it's like the cat's out of the bag.
Mm. So how much of that has had an impact on today, right? When you look at the education system that we have today, if we look at that, religion's basically on its ass, and no one really, at least people who were religious try and pass it on to their kids, but more and more of the kids are turning away from religion, organized religion. So how much of that has had an impact on what we see today with?
I personally think 100%, because we're talking deep down about the Enlightenment. So anyone that kind of saw themselves as an atheist during the Enlightenment, this was the goal, was to completely separate all spirituality, all, subjective sort of religious thinking completely from academia, at least, and then from society at large after that to follow. So, I mean, if we're talking about the Bavarian Illuminati specifically, yeah, because I don't know a lot of other secret, like, for example, Freemasons, you're not supposed to be an eighth. I don't know how it is in UK, but like in America still, I don't think you're allowed to become a Freemason unless you do acknowledge that there's some kind of a higher power. There's
Yeah, I
some
think you have
places,
to worship some kind of god.
yeah, and you don't have to even verbalize exactly what kind of god it is, but it has to be. It's kind of like AA. Like, you can't go to AA unless you also submit yourself to some higher power, whatever you want to decide that to be. But this is one very key difference between the Bavarian Illuminati and any other secret society that I'm really aware of, is that the Bavarian Illuminati at its heart, at least at the very top levels, Adam Weishaupt and down, that it was atheistic. Like, they were anti-religion of any kind, and they didn't want you to believe in any god. And this is also where some of like the shade gets thrown at Freemasonry, where, like, on its own tangent, this guy Leo Taxel, he's also this atheist that is anti-Christian, he's anti-Mason, he writes all this stuff, but he kind of takes some of the rumors or some of the things that the Bavarian Illuminati would say in order to get people to prove that they weren't, dogmatic against their religion. There was similar claims about, like, the Knights Templar would have to, like, profane and, like, do these heretical acts, but that also was to just show that they weren't dogmatic against a certain religion. Like, they could think in a higher order of, if I do this thing, like, you're not going to offend God, it's a symbolic act. But all that stuff kind of gets attributed and then thrown at the Illuminati because of that atheistic sort of intention that they started with.
Mm, yeah, I mean, with the blackmail side of things, that's all over the place now. Because I mean, what you said at the beginning makes sense now, because that model worked. So for other people to replicate that model and try that same model again, it's going to work. It is, in a sense, is it not like building? It's basically building a powerhouse, but is it not building a cult-like experience for in certain settings?
Well, yeah, so the cult-like experience, because we're talking about just the practical way that you would employ this, and like the dynamics of it. But then when it gets into the cult-like version, this is where Adam Weishaupt would claim that he had all this esoteric knowledge that he had gotten from across the world, and that if you joined the Illuminati, you would get some of this profane knowledge about, ancient deities and all sort, like, ancient mystery cults. But the truth is, he didn't really have a lot of info. He had maybe like 1 or 2 degrees worth of work that he was kind of just plagiarizing from other sources and, like, twisting it up. But as people would join on and they're like, what about this second degree? What about this third degree? He realized that he was kind of selling more than he had in stock, like, very, very quickly. And the level of people that he was attracting, they wouldn't be satiated by just kind of like offhanded and like just gaming them, right? So he enlists the help of this guy, Baron von Nige, who I believe was already a prominent Freemason, and he had all these connections. But Baron von Nige took it very seriously. Like, he was actually like, yeah, I'm down for this. Like, let's write an entire system of degrees and like uncover all this occult and arcane knowledge for people. And I think that he's almost like if it were like a business run by two friends, right? Baron von Nige is like the designer that like is obsessed with making a great product and talking to the people and like, you know, wanting to put his creativity out there. And then Adam Weishaupt is just like the cutthroat CEO that's just like, what's the bottom line? How much profit? Like, when are we shipping? So like this dynamic between them eventually makes them split a little bit. But Baron von Nige just put everything that he's had into this. This is like his like life's work almost as a creative endeavor. So he does everything he can to actually make all these degrees and everything legit, which only helps Weishaupt that much more, because now like everything he's doing seems like it really does have this arcane knowledge. But really, he's literally coming back at the end of the day and he's like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, right? But like, hey, I just signed up another 50 suckers, but I told a couple of them that like we're up to degree 8 or 9 right now. So like, where are you at, bud? And he's like, yo, I'm only at like degree 3. He's like, hey, by next month, you're like, just crank them out. Whatever you got to do, invent gods, find gods, combine gods, just make something interesting. So I got something that I can keep selling. And at a certain point, Von Nige was just like, I'm over it, right? Like he realized that it was a Ponzi scheme and that he was like, Adam was always going to be selling more degrees than they had. And then Von Nige was just going to be on the hook to just keep delivering like these really cool degrees. And at a certain point, it's like you can only like metaphorically kill someone and raise them and show them fireworks and gold and all this crazy stuff so many times before they're like, all right, like what else you got, you know? And I think really quickly, I think this is also why one of the old rules of the ancient mystery religions, like what was it, the Elysian the names escape me. That was the ancient Greek one where they followed the cult of Demeter. But you're only supposed to do it one time in your entire life, and you weren't supposed to go and do it a bunch of extra times. And that was cause it kind of built up to this huge crescendo, and then bam, they would deliver this incredible information on you, and then you were supposed to just like soak on that for the rest of your life. But with the Bavarian Illuminati, it was just like, come back next month and it'll be bigger and better like each time, and you can only keep making it bigger and better so many times. But that was the cult aspect, is the people that really bought into that, and they were like, man, I'm learning the mysteries of the universe from this guy.
So what did the Bavarian Illuminati expand into? Like, is it still around today, or is it different iterations, yes, or how does it look?
So the biggest fuel on the fire for Bavarian Illuminati was at, and this is where I'm going to get some of the dates a little bit hazy, but it was the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, and this was, man, the early 1800s maybe. But essentially what happened is that you had, I think it was the Lodge of Perfection, and they sort of had this doctrine that Freemasonry came from Knights Templar. Like they actually kind of had that as part of their core system of beliefs, but it wasn't a universally popular idea for all Masons across Europe. And there was a lot that didn't want to link themselves to the Knights Templar for a lot of the heretical reasons that I mentioned earlier. They were just like, there's not a lot of proof for it. It adds a lot of baggage. Let's just cut that stuff out. Like, let's stop claiming that. So they all get together, and I'm way oversimplifying this. There's a lot of other like little nuances, but they get together at this Congress of Wilhelmsbad, and it's like all these various sort of like splinters of Freemasonry. You got the Lodge of Perfection that believes in the Templar. You've got the ones that don't believe in Templar. You've got the Bavarian Illuminati shows up to this same Congress, and a few others. And collectively they come together and they're like, okay, we're going to just stop doing the Templar thing. So everyone stop claiming to be from the Templars. And, you know, and if you do, then you're technically not doing like real Masonry anymore. And you might be in conflict. Like you might be a co-Mason. At that point, you're kind of like kicked out, right? You're in bootleg Masons. So after that happens, everybody that liked all the Knights Templar stuff, they're kind of like, well, that sucks. Like I've like, the coolest thing that I got is this cool Templar sword, and now I got to like take it off my wall, or, you know, like that was my favorite part. So I'm being a little facetious about that. But the Bavarian Illuminati, they go around, they're like, hey, isn't this messed up, man? Like, we're not allowed to talk about Templars anymore. We're not I don't agree with that. Do you guys want to join our group? Like, you can still be a Mason, but you're going to be in an even more secret version called the Bavarian Illuminati. And here we still believe in the Knights Templar. So like you can secretly keep believing what you want to believe anyways with us. And it wasn't like that the Bavarian Illuminati actually cared about Knights Templar. It was just like they saw this like hemorrhaging of customers that were unsatisfied, right? They just got kicked out of their favorite clubs. So they're like, hey guys, come join this club if you're unhappy. And that caused this incredible swell in lots of Freemasons all across Europe starting to join the Bavarian Illuminati. And then that had this ripple effect where if you got a high-ranking Mason that joined the Bavarian Illuminati, they could go back to their lodge and then recruit other people. And once you just got like the worshipful master and maybe like the senior deacon, junior deacon, or some of the higher positions in the lodge, if you got them in board, well, now the whole lodge is basically like an annex to the Bavarian Illuminati. And you repeat that enough times, and now all of a sudden you've got this Bavarian Illuminati at the top, the eye on the pyramid, and all the Masonic lodges across Europe become like little annexes of that. So, and just imagine that spreads out, and then those guys go to France, and then those guys go to America. And that's where that letter from George Washington, and I think they're talking about John Robison, and George Washington is writing like, I don't think the Illuminati has made it to America. It's like a European thing, but I'll keep my eye open. So that's like that whole entire lineage. And this is the exact same time period, right? 1776 is when the Illuminati is formed. 1776 is when America is formed. So there's lots of interesting overlap there.